All right, welcome to another interview. I don't know, we're calling it Can I Say Something? Maybe not, I don't know. Just doing interviews with awesome people here on YouTube. I'm excited. I got someone that I'm a big fan of, been a fan of for a while now, and probably a lot of you are too. Talking to tripped over it, god damn it. Brian BoxBrown, sorry about that, dude. Author of The He-Man Effect, How American Toy Makers Sold Your Childhood, as well as several other works, including some of my personal favorites, Cannabis, The Illegalization of Weed in America, and Andre the Giant, The Life and Legend. Brian, man, thanks for coming on. How you doing, dude?
Doing really good. Thank you so much for having me. Super stoked to talk about all the stuff going on.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on here. Obviously, we got a lot of weed stuff, and the audience is into it. Maybe some wrestling folks too. But obviously, really excited about the book too. So, just kind of tell a little bit about what's in to expect in the.
Kind of like people see it and they're like He-Man and like, well, yeah, like that was like an old thing from the 80s, right? But it's kind of more, He-Man doesn't enter the book until like 130 pages in or something like that. It's about the kind of like ways in which toy makers, and not just toy makers but media in general, use our own nostalgia to sell us products and things like that, and they create nostalgia and then use that like a ticking time bomb later on in life to sell us more things.
Yeah, that is definitely something I've noticed a lot of folks ever since I'm like 20 years out of college now, and I'm just seeing like more and more of the Instagram posts of just nostalgia. And, obviously you're seeing everything like the box office and everything is just all shape approach each time.
Yeah, not really. What happens is that like I start researching for a book for like a decade before I realize that I'm researching a book. It's just like something I'm like found myself knee deep in, and then at some point it all starts to like cohere, and I'm like, oh yeah, I like already did like a lot of research on that particular topic and thought about it a lot for a long time. And then at some point it becomes like a formal thing, but it's usually because I've learned a few things that like I find interesting that I'm telling people, like everybody I know, over and over again, that
Once
I'm
you start
like,
seeing something's getting traction.
yeah, I know, I don't even care like what my friends or my wife even think of it, but I can't stop talking about it. So,
Okay.
It's,
So do you think you find an obsession and a passion for you? It's
yeah,
play
it's
ball.
like, yeah, once I start telling, I'm like, oh, this is an interesting story, and keep telling it. I kind of like keep refining it over and over again. And I'm like, that's actually a long story that could go blah, blah, blah. And, that's kind of how I ended up at the He-Man Effect, where I was like, spending a long time, years, like looking at old, not just He-Man, but all the toys and properties, TV, movies and TV shows of my youth. Like, I read about Andre the Giant in 2012 or whatever it was, and he had been dead for like 20 years.
Right.
So it's like, part of what makes me me. I think this is kind of like a meta interpretation of like the other works I've done, where it's kind of what the story of why like why am I doing this stuff, why am I looking back, and it's about the concept of nostalgia and like how powerful of a motivator that is and always has been, in terms of like media and politics and etc.
So, yeah, definitely check out this one as well as many others that Brian has done. And one of the things that you mentioned too, I think I saw in your rolling out the book, was saying how weed helped you with writing the book. Can you kind of talk about how that helped?
Yeah, so it kind of just helps me work every day because it helps me focus. Like I have ADHD, like, and I constantly find myself like, oh, blah blah blah. I'm like, oh, I need to go get a pencil sharpener. And then like the next thing you know, it's been like an hour. I'm on like the fifth other task besides getting a pencil sharpener. And I get back to my desk and I'm like, oh crap, yeah, I forgot I needed a pencil sharpener. So stuff like that.
Preaching to the choir, bro.
Yes. So cannabis helps me kind of just like hyper focus on what I'm supposed to be doing, which is making comics. It helps me to kind of like zero in on that and like relax all this outside world stuff and kind of focus on making art, which is like a joyful experience for me, because it's hard for me to like it feels almost like a zen experience, like where those are the few moments I'm able to shut out the rest of the world and kind of like, you know,
there's
focus
really
on that.
there's really something to be said like when you hit that creative flow, and I feel like when weed hit like helps you get into that, it's like you just feel kind of like creatively unstoppable for a little bit.
Yeah, for a minute, but it gives you the energy. Like people are like often are like, oh, weed like makes me creative, and people are often like, well, maybe you're not actually creative and you're just like really high, and in my opinion, like that doesn't really matter because what ends up happening, whether you think you just are really high and you think it's you think you're being like creative or genius or something, it doesn't matter because at the end of it, you have a finished thing
Exactly.
that you did your thing. You know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
it
So,
came from your mind one way or another.
right, whether it's genius, probably not, but it's done and it
Yeah,
came out of you. And, I think being as an artist, you have to kind of like briefly experience hubris every time you make anything because, or else you're sitting there going like, why would anyone care about this thing that I'm doing? You know what I mean? There's part of
yeah.
you that has to be like almost delusionally thinking, no, everybody's going to care about this. They have to because like this is so, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, you do. Because otherwise, it's like, why am I pushing this rock up the hill?
yeah. Or but for real, I think that like there's times I'm doing it where I know that there are some people that it's going to connect with. Like when I do my Legalization Nation strip,
Yeah.
it's often when that comes out, a lot of people connect with it, and it makes me feel like validated in my feelings of like annoyance with, with a lot of things going on.
Yeah, man, you were preaching a lot of the sentiments of the choir. Like I love it because you tap into the state market level of the stuff, you tap into the federal level. It's it's really good explainers, but you can definitely see the frustration in the underlying of the market.
Yeah, I mean, it came from that. I mean, it's that's like I said, like that was me complaining to everybody around me and everybody I know, and then being like, all right, whatever. And I was like, I couldn't even get it, explain the depth of my how like horrible it is in my words. Like I felt like because it's so it's difficult to explain and kind of like all this it's bad for weird reasons. People are like, what do you mean? Like it's legal weed.
It's
Like how could it be
it's a
bad?
lot of
Like,
nuance of bad to it.
right. Yeah. So you have to kind of like, you know, or else you're just saying, oh, weed's bad. Well, weed's of course not bad. Weed's great, but this whole thing that's
His
happening
rollout's not so great.
is bad. For a lot of stupid reasons. You
Yeah.
know,
So,
I'm
oh,
you
sorry.
know
Go on.
I'm just like reasons aren't are greed, stigma. You know, it all complicates everything in such like a unique way, and also cannabis's legal status for the last 100 years has been this illegal thing that's been demonized by all of media for hundreds of 100 years at least.
Right.
um and so it's just like complicated everything. It's complicated every rollout of every town. Like it's just there's
Yeah.
all complications everywhere.
It's like I feel like every state that has like an opt out law now, you're just like, all right, the trend is going to be this state or this municipality is going to opt out. They're going to realize how bad they lose money, and then depending on how conservative and uptight they are, they'll eventually change the law because they realized how dumb
Opt
it
in.
was.
But the thing is that we all know that they're going to change their mind eventually, but like we also don't have the time to wait for them to change their
Exactly.
mind
Exactly.
because those towns that are allowing it are getting co-opted by these huge companies that are having this huge first mover advantage because of things like that, because the townships are it's so hard to find a place in like you said 70% or something townships opt out.
Right.
I mean, like that leaves a very small amount of towns or places where you can have your business.
Yeah, and I think that's like, especially I'm in New York, and I think looking at New York, it's almost like a small microcosm of what California might see. With these
Mm,
deserts essentially, where it's just
yeah,
like access points are going to be choked out, and then they're going to turn around and be like, "Oh, why is the unlicensed market not like
yeah.
thriving?" And blah blah blah. And it's like you've created
There,
your own damn beast, man.
there's a million like things that could go wrong and happen. And it's always about
Yeah,
access to the market. It's always, about creating access for small business to the market, and it always gets the people that always seem to have good intentions, it always ends up not
Yeah,
working out
I
the right way.
I mean, yeah, what is it? The road to hell is paved with good intentions,
Yeah,
man. And it's like I've seen a lot of people that I know give a real like genuine damn about this thing, but like whether it be the government mechanisms, bureaucracy, or whatever the case may be, like it just gets like gummed up, and like we're even now at the point now where we're focusing to the Minnesota to see if they're going to get the market right. And it's like
yeah,
Jesus, man, New York has barely
Minnesota.
even got out the gate.
I know. I mean, because I think there's part of, I think, a voice in, especially from legislators, but also just in general, where the pro cannabis side is still willing to accept a lot of negative things about cannabis as a given.
Mhm.
They'll go into a negotiation. We have to protect, make sure the kids aren't within 1,000 feet of this dispensary. But there's like, 7-Eleven across the street from the school selling whatever.
Right.
So I mean, and I think like there's people that are just like, all right, we'll accept all that stuff because we just wanted to get it through. But there has to
Compromise
be
or
someone being like,
placating.
no, like why? Explain why
Yes.
first about all these things, because these are the things that are really among the things that are really making it difficult is all this safety illusion or surrounding it.
Yeah, you got me dangerously teetering on a point talking about how I hate the two-party system because this just this ball game to play. But like whatever the case may be in that sense, like yeah, I feel like no matter who you're talking to, whether it be the conservative, the liberal lawmakers, whoever the powers may be on the local or federal level, you have to play ball by them. And if you upset them, they can
Yeah,
go and like take it away. And it's like that's not how lawmaking should be, man. Like we're what
yeah,
88% of the country agrees that this should be legalized. Like why the hell aren't we doing something that actually is going to benefit, the people that have been affected, the business people, like everybody, like actually
yeah.
give what the country wants.
It's you don't see even the pro cannabis people on both sides of the aisle aren't educated at all enough to make decisions about it, and it's just like they are very easily co-opted by people that want to legalize weed, but want to do it in a very specific way that benefits them the most
Yeah.
and kind of makes it difficult for everybody else. And that's, like I said, like it makes it muddy because then you see a petition there that's like support the legalization of weed, and you're like, yeah, I support weed, yeah, sign it. And you look at it and it's like, oh, this is
Oh,
actually this petition is supporting a law that is absolutely trash, like that is just a
right.
complete
Like,
pushing. And then so then you're like, all right, well, don't pass this law, and then it doesn't pass, and then now it's 2 or 3 years later, and like 12,000 people have been arrested per year. So it's
and
like,
that's the big point. Yeah. Like,
yeah,
I'm cool with waiting on business rollout. I'm cool. Like, I don't want to see, hardworking individuals losing money that they shouldn't have, but like, I'm okay with understanding the market's coming online. But
right.
like you said, people are getting arrested in the meantime. Like, if we
Mhm.
could put a halt on that, I would be okay with a lot more of this. But like,
Yeah,
like, if you're not legalizing homegrown, you're not getting people out of prison or at least stopping the arrests. Like, what the hell are we doing?
yeah. I mean, I think that, like, in Vermont, they legalized cannabis years ago, and they just the market, they legalized in like 2018 or something, and then the legal market didn't open up until 2023 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of benefit to that. One, like you said, it stops the arrests, and they have homegrown stuff. Um, and two, it like takes the gun out of the hand of the people forcing bills on people, because you don't have to be like take whatever they got, because there's not thousands of people being arrested every year still.
Right.
It also, in a weird way, I think, like, cuts down on this opt-out situation, like, because it gives people 5 years of just being like, all right, well, it's
Get it to
legal
figure it out.
anyway. Yeah, like, and
Right.
how to get used to the idea and be like, oh yeah, well, my neighbor's like growing
It's a
weed,
good
and then
point.
then
Yeah, you don't
five years
want you're like
later,
shocking the system on some of these people
right?
otherwise.
And then 5 years later, they legalized, and the township's like, all right, well, it was already illegal anyway. Like, why not open up a store? Like, who cares? You know, um,
Yeah. I mean,
And also,
that's what Virginia attempted to do until this new governor came
oh my
and fucked
God,
that whole
poor
momentum up.
Virginia. But yeah, Virginia's a difficult place. Like they really in some ways like committed to arresting people no matter what. Like their
Yeah,
DUI laws are really strict there. Like it's just even in the legalization law that they had, it was like you better keep all your weed in the trunk always.
yeah.
Like stuff for
I feel
open
like Virginia.
container.
I feel like that's Virginia's like track record though. Is like the reddest of the liberal states. They're like, cool,
Yeah,
we're cool with weed legalization, but
definitely.
if you fuck up, we're gonna fuck you up. And it's like, okay,
Pound you.
cool. Yeah, like
They're also like right on that border of Maryland and DC, which are both legal now. So it's just like we are in PA, where it's like everybody around you is now
right.
legal. There's pressure on the state to be like, all right, well, we got to get this together too. We're getting left behind.
Yeah, what's the deal? What's the latest on Pennsylvania? For a while it seemed like everyone was like, "Oh, they're
So
going to fast track to it," and now it seems
no,
like that's not
I
happening
mean,
at all.
no. So we just passed like the first. There's two legislative slash sessions. The first one just ended, and they didn't really do anything. They announced a legislation bill that may get talked about next session, but it's really not a good bill. It's just the same bill that they had previously announced, which was just basically a legalize the existing structure, medical structure, which is all MSOs, and then I think they did have medical home grow on there though. But it was not a good bill. I mean, it was not good for small business at all. It was not any kind of nothing I would call like a progressive bill, or even like
No,
as progressive as New York and New Jersey.
no equitable parameters or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there may have been something like that in there, but it was not enough.
Satisfactory.
Yeah, no, not nothing that was like we're going to enable the Pennsylvania farmers or anything like that.
And
Um,
and how's the med market like? I know you just said it's MSO. What's the pricing like? I heard it's pretty steep
so
with taxes. Is that right?
so not too. It was for a very long time, like
Okay.
truly expensive, but it has come down a lot, especially in Philly, where you can go over the border to Jersey and get from the same companies right in New Jersey. But there's only 25 companies in the whole cartel. A lot of them have like have bought each other out too over the years, and so we have pretty much all the big boys.
You're already seeing the
and
consolidated, all that sort of shit.
But the prices for medical have come down. Like Cresco's prices at their like dispensaries, you can get an ounce for like in the $200 range.
Right.
The
How's
prices
the quality?
for not MSO quality. I mean, not good. I mean, I don't use it frankly anymore because it just
You live in
it's
Philly?
not really worth it. Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly. That's unnecessary.
Yeah, I'm not looking for a dispensary in Brooklyn, even though I want to support some folks. It's like I got my plug. I'll give you 200.
Yeah, I mean, we had to get the cards, to stay safe, to get the medical card.
Sure.
But yeah, it also leaves that little thing open where like every 6 months or every 3 or 4 months, you're like, I just need like a pen or something. And I just need it now, like on the way out the door. I'm just gonna stop in at the
It's like the
dispensary.
convenience store.
Yeah. And then you pop in and you get it and you're like, God, that was so expensive and this sucks. And then like you just have this buyer's remorse. But then a few months later you forget about that and do it again. It's like you gotta ban yourself from those dispensaries.
Man, yeah, it's I like seeing different dispensaries across the country, but I mean, when I'm at home,
Me
it's
too.
like I'm just going to my plug. I love my plug. I support my plug. Like,
But
that's kind of who I go
you go
to.
to some places in some states and the dispensaries are great, are impressive.
Yeah.
You go to Oregon and
Oh yeah,
you walk in and you're like, oh wow, there's a lot of good stuff here, and it's fresh and like they keep it in the freezer for you, and like
it's so nice to see that. Yeah, like people give a shit about the plant. Have you been? My favorite is Maine. I haven't been to a ton of markets.
Oh sure,
but Maine, like great prices, great quality. Like I took out an eighth there that cost like $30, I think, and I was expecting MSO quality stuff, nice colorful stuff, the little bit of trichomes on, like not the richest, but it was like a damn good piece of flower.
The medical market in Maine is amazing, and it's the same. The medical market in Maine is essentially Maine's Prop 215 because it started in like '97, which was like right after 215, and it was very accessible because it was like a caregiver situation. So you could become a caregiver, then you're good. That's it. Then you could
Yeah.
grow a lot enough. $1,500 a year, I think, is the license fee, and you can grow a lot of weed and sell it at a medical dispensary, which there is a ton of in
Yeah.
Maine.
You can
And
find your options.
yes, and Maine accepts all out of state, pretty much all out of state medical cards. And so that market became amazing. But the Maine adult use market looks a lot more like the shitty adult use markets across
Yeah.
Maine and
Was that
California is similar.
and was that because of the out of state overturning rule or like the out of
I
state
don't
ownership rule,
know.
or do you see other things?
It looks a lot more just like New Jersey, where there's a lot of
Hmm.
opt out. People opted out of adult use. I don't know if maybe you couldn't opt out of like having
Yeah,
medical or like a
I'm
medical
not sure.
grow.
I know I
Yeah,
was down like an hour
because
outside of Portland, and there was plentiful shops, which was nice to
oh
see because
yeah,
for a not heavy population area.
hmm
But
yeah,
it didn't seem like
yeah,
any MSOs at least.
plenty of cannabis. Yeah, the MSOs have had trouble there because they have different tactics there. Where in PA, New Jersey, they're the only game in town. They like start jacking up the prices and like really, really, hammering people with prices. In Maine, where they're getting killed on quality and price, they drop their prices to almost nothing and are selling ounces for $50-$60 to
Yeah,
undercut the small farms that are already in existence. And then so you look at the prices on the same product, one in New Jersey and one in Maine, and the
insane.
New Jersey prices are like $500 an ounce, and Maine
Oh
is
my
60. It's like 10
dude,
times the price.
I had a similar experience when I went to Jersey for an article recently, and I told them I was like, "Yeah, I was in Michigan. It was like $50 an ounce for like pretty decent weed," and they were just like really pissed when you hear that
Yeah.
sort of
Oh my
information.
God. Well,
Yeah,
Michigan too has a similar situation where they had a
they,
caregiver system,
yeah,
and that type of system allows small businesses to like get started. They might eventually become adult use, but it's difficult to jump in at the $1 million investment mark that
right.
it takes to become an adult use, seller
And one
or
scary thing I
provider.
also saw, one thing I saw from Maine too, is that a lot of caregivers are leaving the market too because of the way the regulation. What is it? They're
Mhm.
being regulated by like the tobacco board or similar regulations to
Yeah,
tobacco or something like that.
they're trying to add all kinds of stuff all the time for that reason, to shrink the medical, to move the medical people out. It's the same thing in California, really, where all those there was a far more companies open under Prop 215 than there are under the new Prop 64, because of the restrictive compliance issues.
Right.
Um,
You're not kicking people out, but you're essentially kicking people out.
yeah, exactly. We'll give you 3 months to get in compliance, but it's impossible to get into compliance.
Right.
It's like it's almost
Unless you have a ton of money to
how
keep up.
in red states for a long time they would, to stop like abortions, they would make really kind of ridiculous regulations that they'd have to keep up with, like totally arbitrary stuff, like your counters
Right.
have to be X high and all these things, and it would
Just
shut
pricing
places
you out
down.
either. Yeah, but
Yeah.
either you can't afford to keep up or regulations are going to trip you up eventually.
Yes. And so, that's why, Maine is great now, but that market could vanish or at
Yeah.
least shrink.
Yeah, please don't fuck that market up. It's one of my
Yeah,
favorites.
it's the best.
Well, dude, we could go down a rabbit hole here, and I mean, for the sake of the weed content fans, I've kept the wrestling stuff low, and I've said to Brian, I want to bring him back when I develop some other like wrestling stuff. But dude, I got to get you on the typical wrestling question that everyone gets
Sure.
asked: what is your Mount Rushmore? Who is Andre on there, and who else makes it?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I would put Andre on there for sure. He was kind of like his own thing. I wouldn't even put him, I would put him as like his own, the Mount,
He was the Mountain.
yeah, like, yeah, exactly. He was Mount Fuji or whatever. Um, but I was thinking the other day about like how great some of these old people were, but also, were they great? Or was I just like 12 when I saw it? And maybe they're not so. So some of my personal favorites probably is like Bret the Hitman Hart is like one of my faves like of all time, and he was my favorite when I was a kid. And then as I got older and was like a teenager and in college, he was still like the fucking coolest dude.
Right.
And Also, I found recently a photo of Bret the Hitman Hart where he's like wearing a shirt that says like United Pot Smokers or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, it's from like
Oh
old
shit.
one. He's wearing like a Stampede. It looks like pre WWE days.
Oh, all right. I'm
Yeah,
gonna need to find that.
yeah, and
That's
also he
awesome.
talks about smoking weed in his biography.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
last Dark Side of the Ring, he talked a lot about doing coke with Adrian
yeah,
Adonis.
yeah. Oh, I got to watch that one.
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah. So I love Bret Hart, and then it's like Terry Funk up there. Mick Foley for me is up there. This is like some of my faves, like of all time, like just like crazy. Rob Van Dam, maybe.
Yeah.
I have
For
a lot of
the
people that I love that I appreciate like all kinds of wrestling.
Yeah, I hate asking that question, but I do like it just because it opens up the floodgate of who is some of your favorites. Because like
Yeah,
I have like a solid 2 to 3, and then it's always who are you going to catch me on? It's like asking me my favorite
yeah,
horror movie. It's
yeah. Like what's
Monday,
your
Tuesday,
favorite
Wednesday, all give me a
song?
different choice.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they're
Yeah,
all great. They're it's such like a really we think about all the stars in pro wrestling, but it's really about an ensemble, about like all a team of all these great performers putting on a overall good show. So you know, I think there's just like so much good. There's so
yeah.
much.
Yeah, it's all about the casting. You just gotta like, what's your favorite? What most energy? That's like
Yeah,
whenever I used to have my top picks, it would always like kind of slide in someone who like was favorite, but not like on the top list. Like I usually throw in like a Booker T or a Raven, and it was just
yeah,
like I love those guys. Like they're
yeah,
like maybe on some people's rush boards, but probably not many. And I was just like, I loved them. They were fun. Like Raven was like my dude for like the '90s.
yeah. I mean, and it's also like sometimes they just had such a good match that you saw one time where they had the crowd energy was just like out of control, and like the comeback was crazy, and like it's all about Bret Hart talks about it in his book, like the beginning of the match, like the people should be bored, and by
Yeah.
the end you're transferring them into totally ecstatic and jumping up and down.
That man's ring psychology was like
Oh,
out of this
he's
world.
amazing, dude. He's
I
a
mean,
storyteller.
I have a friend of mine. She's a content creator, and she's madly like Shawn Michaels side. And it's like I can't. Like I love Shawn. Shawn Michaels is a great wrestler, all that stuff. But like Bret Hart, I genuinely hated during the Team Canada days when I was like in my early like adolescence. It was like, what, man, I bought into that hook, line, and sinker. He made great matches. Like him versus Owen was like one of my favorite matches of all time. Like
he was a great heel too. I mean, like
yeah,
he was great, but he was both. He could do it all.
and even in the crappy days of WCW, when he got Goldberg to spear him with that plate on, it was just like one of the fucking best things.
Yes, that amazing. Like he just never quit. Never, even though he talks about like being beat down and he hated WCW and stuff, like he was still trying to be as creative as possible out there.
I mean, that was a dude who was passionate about his art. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, dude, like I said, I could talk to you about wrestling, weed, and all this shit all day, but I don't want to take up too much of your time, man. But anything you want to close on? How can we stay in touch with you? How can we follow your stuff, and where can we pick up the He-Man Effect?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter until that goes to the ground, probably.
T-minus.
So BoxBrown, but also on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky as well. And you can check out Legalization Nation every Tuesday, and on any of those sites. And also check out my book, The He-Man of This Effect, which is out now in bookstores everywhere, about the concept of weaponized nostalgia.
Brian BoxBrown, man, thank you so much. Really excited to share this with everyone, and hope we can talk wrestling soon. Thanks, man.
Yeah.